guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. We'll have more time for picture taking. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, GridSmart Intersect. We are delighted to have all of you here. It's been a great week so far. My name is Chris Verichoff, and I am the sales rep for the state of Florida. And today I have the great honor of introducing Krishna Desai. Krishna Desai is an enthusiastic marketing communications professional and the head of marketing for Cubic's entire marketing function globally. Krishna was recently elected as Marketing Communications Director for ITS UK to bring a new perspective into the way the industry is positioning itself and how it should think when building policies that affect a different demographic. Krishna is joining us today to share her thoughts on how the industry can better position itself to the general public. You can also read more from Krishna in the latest of Talk ITS. So without further ado, all the way from London, please give us a warm welcome for Krishna Desai.
Thank you. Lauren assured me that no matter what I said, you guys would love me because I have a British accent. The only problem is when I get nervous, I start talking like this, in an Indian accent. So if I do that, please just, look enthusiastic. Okay, cool. So I'm here to talk about ITS for Dummies. It seems a bit ironic, seeing as you're all professionals in the field, and I don't think any of you are dummies. But it's really important we start talking about ITS outside of the industry. We had a great question earlier today about what we're doing to educate citizens more about the work that we do. And I don't think we do enough. So firstly, I'm going to start off by asking a question. Raise your hands if you actually know what ITS is or what it stands for. That's good, because you're all in ITS. But there's a lot of organizations still that have employees that don't know what ITS is or stand for, even though they're working on traffic light signaling, cabling, on connected and autonomous vehicles, on safety cameras. They just know they're working in transport. They don't know what ITS is, what smart cities is, what transit as a service is, what mobility on demand is. They just think, it's just transport. But ITS is evolving, and we need to make that message clear between us internally and then give that message out externally. Where it's changing from it being solely driven by traffic management, and it's changing to shared mobility and mobility on demand. And we need to be relaying this message out to the external world. So why is it so important that we relay outside? Most of the funding for ITS actually comes through taxation, and yet it's the taxpayers that don't know what we're spending the money on. All they see is the Boston potholes, the huge amounts of traffic when they're all trying to go to work at 5 o'clock in the morning. All they see is extra charging. They already pay tax, but then you're charging them road user charging. You're charging them usage for low emission zones. You're charging them to go into specific cities at specific times. And they're just like, where is my money going? This is, if I could leave a TripAdvisor review, it wouldn't be good. But there's no single entity for them to even complain to. We don't advertise it as well, and they don't have no forum to understand what we're doing. And I think it's really important because when I traveled to Nashville a couple of days ago, my cousin came to pick me up, and he was a little late. I thought maybe he's just stuck in some traffic. And we got to the car park, and he said, "This is why I'm late." And he pointed to the ceiling, and the bays had green and red lights, which I was like, "You were late because you couldn't find parking?" And he said, no, I could find parking. The red and green lights kind of indicate when the bays are free or not, so it makes parking really easy. So I found parking within 30 seconds, and I said, "Oh, so you were late because you could find parking?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "I don't get it." And he said he was so fascinated by it. There was actually some marketing and billboards about the system. So he started reading about it. And then he went to a link where it had more information. And so he read about it for 20 minutes. while I was waiting at baggage handling. And the millennial generation want to know. If you provide them information, they will read about it. But the problem is people such as organizations like ourselves, public agencies, transport bodies, we don't tell the public. We just assume they don't want to hear about it, but really they do. And that's completely different to my brother, who has been going around telling everybody that we're building smart motorways in the UK, and that's when they're going to build an extra lane that's going to charge electric vehicles. So now the electric vehicles never need to be charged because this lane is going to magically charge it for them. And I had to burst his bubble and say that's really not what it is. It's just going to be extra digital signs that tells you when you need to slow down. And he goes, that's really not smart. Like, why did they call it that? But there's signs that say they're building smart motorways, but not actually what it is. You know, we don't tell people what things are, why we're doing things, and it's becoming a big problem in the industry. Recruitment is also becoming a really big problem. I think, as Greg mentioned previously, ITS is changing and the skill sets that we're going to be needing is changing as well. And all of that pool of talent is going towards other industries. They're going to the car manufacturers, or they're going to the likes of Google, Amazon, or Microsoft, because that's all the brands that they're interacting with on a daily basis. They don't interact with our brands, even though they interact with our products all the time. And so we need to do a better job at telling the world, because what we do is sexy, you know? Why was it that a kid growing up wanted to be a train driver? When did he lose that ambition growing up? When did that become, I want to be a coder? Like, you can be a coder, just do it for us. So that's one thing. But that comes with some challenges. We just don't have the funding. I think what you mentioned earlier was spot on. We're have so much self-interest to promote ourselves within the industry. Like, we come to a lot of conferences, we talk about our big ideas, how much the industry has transformed. That's great, we all know. We can all read, we all go to the seminars, we all read the case studies, we read the news, but it's telling the outside world that's important. And the reason we don't do that is because we don't have enough resources and we don't have enough money. We really are stuck with promoting our own companies to win the bids, or doing what we can to be seen as the thought leader within the industry, or wanting to be the best agency in the industry. But why not tell the public about what you're doing? And you get the Audis of the world that will come to Nevada and Las Vegas and create the cars that have the information systems that tell them when the traffic lights are going to be phased and become green and red so they can stop accordingly. That's our technology, that's Trafficware's Atom system. That's the agencies that allow for that policy to be built. That's everybody that's got any information that's going into that database telling that car what to do. That's us, that's not you. But yet they get all the credit because they have the money to make it seem like it was their great idea. It's their cars, it's them, it's sexy, come work for us. And you're like, no, come work for us. We did it, but we don't do that. Some of the other challenges is fear of creating a negative impression. Speed cameras, it causes people to slow down. Are they going to be late for work? Congestion pricing, again, we're charging them more when they've already paid taxation, but we're not using emotive language for why we're doing that. And the three things that most people can connect to is love, death, and time. Everything that we're doing is reducing the amount of deaths on the road. And I'm sure most of us have somebody that we know, a friend or family, that's either been involved in an accident on the road or unfortunately passed away as a result of it. That's the messaging we need to give out. Everything we're doing is for reducing this. Love. You're using our infrastructure so you can go and do the things you love the most, or be with the people you love the most. Don't be stuck on the roads. And lastly, time. We're trying to save you time, but if you're not following the information systems, if you're not telling us where the potholes are, or helping give us the information for us to create the right policies, we can't really help you. And accountability. Whose role is it to tell the citizens? Is it the agencies? Is it the thought leaders? Is it suppliers? Is it the academia? I would argue it's everybody. It's everybody that works in the industry. Go just tell your family and friends what it is that you work on, why it's so cool. But we don't. It's like you go home, you switch off. You won't understand, darling. Like, you won't get it. It's too complicated. I don't want to talk about it. I do that too. My friends say, what do you do? And I get really passionate. And then I'm like, oh, whatever, like, it's that road stuff. It's the public transport stuff. And we don't really do it enough. And what actions are required to overcome the challenges? So one of the most powerful things is the media. People get the information from what they read. If they don't read it, it doesn't exist. And so we at Cubic did a Transport Innovation Day in London, and we got the transport correspondents from the Times come in and hear about the latest developments in transport. And that was the first time he had ever heard of mass. Never heard of it before, but he was the expert in the field. And so we talked about mass, and we talked about where the future's going. We got him in contact with the Mass Alliance, we got him in contact with Transport for London. So he managed to get a 360-degree story on how this will affect agencies, suppliers, and also organizational bodies. And he wrote a really nice, compelling story about it. But we need to make it as easy as possible for them to get that news, to make it newsworthy for their audience, and give them real interesting facts, figures, and information. And sometimes we have to do that together. Sometimes we don't have that story individually. Our product isn't that strong enough. The solution we're providing isn't strong enough. But together, it's all providing something that's important, and maybe we need to do more together. And when we go to places like ITS America or ITS World Congress or whichever conferences it is, we hold media days that shows all of the collaboration taking place and how it's building towards the future of mass, because individually we can't tell that story. We also need to talk to younger people that the policies impact. We don't do that enough, and they're the ones that care about the future of mobility. So there was a report that came out recently that said the millennial generation don't want to drive cars. Their parents' generation love driving cars, but they actually want to car share, they want an autonomous vehicle, they want to carpool, they want that time back. We want that time to read, catch up with work, catch up with family, mainly to have a nap, not gonna lie, but we want that time back for ourselves. That's where you laugh, guys, that? Never mind, okay, great. And mainly as well, social media. If you're not on Twitter, you don't exist. You're not alive. And so a lot of youngsters get their information from Twitter and LinkedIn, from articles that they can read that has 30 seconds worth of information. And we need our subject matter experts and our thought leaders to have a digital presence as well, because it's great going to events like this and networking, but if you can't personify that into something the end customer will relate to, then it's hard. And that's where influential marketing comes in. A lot of companies have started getting influential marketers who are digital people, who have large followings. So they basically get paid to just be themselves. And they tell your message to that end audience in their own authentic ways. So we don't have to, because they don't want to listen to the authorities. They don't really want to listen to the suppliers. They want to listen to somebody they trust in that will give them the raw information that they need. And maybe we need to start getting some more influential marketers to be our brand and personify everything that we're doing to the outside world. And the last thought I want to leave you with is, what is your why? Why do you do the job you do? Why are you in the industry that you're in? Why does what you do matter? Why wouldn't you want to tell people outside the industry? And with that, I'd like to introduce our next keynote, Crissy Ditmore. She's the head of strategy at Cubic. She works on the expansion of mobility as a service across the globe. Crissy assists urban, suburban, and rural developments of sustainability futures for complex mobility needs. She has a master's in project management and is a chair of the board of Travel Spirit Foundation for North America, co-chair for Mobility on Demand Alliance Public Policy Committee, and is active with the Coalition for Smarter Transport. As you can tell, she spends most of her time in the air, not underground, and when she is finally home, she goes from being mass transit to mass food, with her and her husband producing organic foods from honey, teas, and fruits on their farm, which they sell to the homeless banks. So, give it to her.
That is hilarious. Well, unfortunately, Krishna knows a lot about me personally, and I was like, where is she going to go with this? So thank you very much for being here today. And I'll say to the people that are sitting outside and watching this on the screens, I am way more entertaining in person. So there's air conditioning. I'll just start by saying I was at the ITE district meeting in Des Moines, Iowa last week at a conference. Oh yeah, you were there. Raise your hand. He's my witness. So I said, traffic management isn't sexy, and I was quickly corrected. So we're gonna bring back sexy because Krish talked about it a lot too, and I heard that tonight's event is also sexy, so I will see all of you there. So I'm a giant geek, like really massive geek in lots of aspects of this. So we will diverge and go on a nice little rabbit hole today. So we're gonna talk a lot about what is mobility as a service, but also I'll start by saying, hi, I'm Crissy, and I'm not the enemy. I am cubic. Okay, see, there's a little bit of that. Okay, so we're gonna start there. So Cubic is moving into, and I'm going to share a lot of this with you today, what is Cubic's strategy when it comes to Next City? Why did we make these purchases, and now TrafficWare and GridSmart are part of our family? Because there's a rhyme to our reason here. We are building on a future that we know is coming. And so as we're working together through these problems, just know I'm not the enemy. Cubic's not the enemy. We're not here to change all of the greatness that's happened, clearly. This is a super awesome event, and how many of you have been here more than once? Yeah, okay. So I was at lunch with people who've said that they've been here for, I don't know, something like 10 years or something like that. Is that a thing? Have they had it that long? 5? Yeah, okay, so they were lying. Perfect. So without getting too much into everything that Cubic does, and we have multiple sides, transportation, defense. I'm with the transportation side of the business, and I do work on strategy. So let me share with you our strategy. So there's kind of a lot going on right now. It's not just our industry. It's like every industry is being disrupted digitally, as well as by users who are expecting a totally unique and personal to me, because I'm special, user experience. It's a generation of people who grew up on products that are literally based in me, the iPhone, the iPod. So your expectation of how you are receiving your information, how you're interacting in your environment, and how you live is very personal. And all of that is because I am special. And so what I want to do is different than what the guy beside me is going to do. And if I decide that means I'm going to be in my car every day, then dagnabbit, that's what I'm going to do. And you're not going to get me in a bus no matter how hard you try. Okay, there are going to be people like that. Therefore, we have to have a complex suite of solutions that are going to meet the needs of all of these individuals. Next City. Next City is Cubic's strategy to address that need for an operating life of me. What that means is we're utilizing what we call these 3 pillars to address how we interact with our customers and how we interact with your end customers, which are the travelers. So we see our customers as both of those things. So we go from a separate, disparate line of services to a fully integrated framework that incorporates a lot of different aspects of the industry. So the TTI example talked about data, and that's really going to continue to be important, which means it has to be an operational analytical framework regardless of what kind of product you're using. And those products have to be interoperable. And we have to fully define how we're going to share our data. These are all very complex things that we're going to have to be moving towards in this unified framework. So in the Next City vision, we have decided Cubic don't have all of the solutions for these things, but we know people who do. So we go out and we interact with the industry-leading experts in traffic management systems. So GridSmart brings a very unique set of solutions, and super cool, might I add. The first time I went to one of their conferences and I got to get in their booth and the little riser thing that takes you up to the, I told you I'm a geek, so I'm like, yes, take all the pictures. I want all the pictures of me with the stuff. So we integrate GridSmart and we integrate TrafficWare so that we can identify how we can utilize a multitude of systems to address all of these needs that are going to have to come into our traditional line of business, which is transportation payments. That's most of the payment cards that you use across the world in the major transit cities are pretty much our cards. So that's great, but also paying for your fare is a really small subset of what transportation as a whole is going to have to address moving forward. Therefore, we get to move to this kind of complex interaction of all of these services. So I personally am a geek, but I also hate architecture diagrams. Sorry, engineers in the room. So sometimes these are kind of just hard for people to follow. So this gives you a snapshot, and by that I mean actual snapshot if you wanted to take a picture so you can go back and look at it later of how all of these intertwine with each other. And I'm actually talking about our employees, because I think that they're like, oh, that's how all that works. Perfect. So we're doing all of this to build into what we see as really our future, the future of commuting, the future of transportation, the future of how we are interacting with each other as citizens. Because all of these things fold into a level of transportation that's going to affect not just my ability to get to work, but every single aspect of my life, the shipment of goods and services and people. That takes us to mobility as a service. Everybody here knows what mobility as a service is, right? Yeah, total experts, got it. So, mobility as a service is a combination of public and private transportation services in a given regional environment that provides holistic, optimal, and people-centered travel options to enable end-to-end journeys paid for by the users as a single charge, and which aims to achieve key public policy objectives. Right? That's a lot of words. What the heck does all that mean? So, we're gonna break it down for you. I'm not gonna rap, I could, but I'm still gonna break it down for you, of how each of these words are actually technologies that build on top of each other to get to the end goal that we're looking for. Mass is, people are going to say a product. Mass is not a product. These people are lying to you, they're selling you a product. I have products to sell, that's not a terrible thing, I won't vilify. However, mass is a concept and a framework that builds on data sharing and interoperability to get to an end goal which should be dictated by a policy need in a region. So this means each of those words are going to layer on top of each other. So a combination of public and private transportation in a region. That means we are going to have different models of how to approach that business. Has anyone here heard of the company WHIM, Mass Global? Okay, Krishna, thank you. Okay, good. So WHIM is the company that kind of coined the term mobility as a service. They have a subscription package of services. It was based in Helsinki, Finland, where a private company has negotiated contracts with every single one of the kinds of transportation agencies that are in their region, so buses and rail. They even have a contract with Enterprise to be able to rent cars on the weekends. This whole package of services, bike share and whatever new micromobility pogo stick comes up next year, they have this whole package, package of services that are offered as a subscription. So for €500 a month, I have access to all of those things, unlimited. That's significant. It's a shift in the business model of how we approach how we're interacting with transportation. The issue with that is their business model is predicated on the top 10% of earners, because most people, especially from an equity standpoint, are not going to be able to just come up with that extra cash to be able to pay up front. So this is why mass is a framework, because the opposite side of that is actually going to be a mass operating model. And that's what we're going to be moving towards in terms of our industry. So the public sector is going to be saddled with trying to address the same level of service that these private companies are able to negotiate contracts to offer. So in both of those scenarios, you're really addressing the me of the traveler, but in different ways. And when you have a mass business model in an area, that's going to be one user group, which is why you have to have the mass operating model in the same area so that you can address people who are just traveling through, who maybe don't have a smartphone because they're like my husband and the government's watching you, and so he does still have a flip phone, but we won't talk about that. Because also they could still track you on your flip phone, duh. But this is allowing each of those types of users the freedom of the choice to be able to age in place if I want to, because yes, he's a farmer. I do live on a farm, that's not a lie. So you're going to have people who want to have access to that service. And if we only address cities, we are doing this wrong. We have to address rural, suburban, urban, a full matrix of where everybody lives, meet them where they live, and build technologies on top of each other to really meet those goals. So that's really the crux of what is mobility as a service. And then I'm going to give you a whole bunch of other information on top of it. So if we're providing holistic traffic options, holistic, optimal, people-centered, what does all that mean? It means I can utilize a central location to contract services for freight and shipping, that I can contract to be able to offer transportation services, that I have traffic management as part of my integrated systems so that I know what side of town traffic is going to be at. Maybe I'm going to change my mind and maybe I'm going to go to dinner instead of going home on a whole other side of town, because if I take that extra hour, it's going to help me to avoid 3 hours of traffic. To enable end-to-end journeys. This is like the thing that everybody has in their hand and they're super excited about, and I don't want to discount mobile as a technology because it's also a very important part of the puzzle. It does leave some people behind, although I have met homeless people with cell phones, with smartphones. So I think that these are really matters of choice because there are equitable solutions for getting to each of these different kinds of user groups. So we're using the term one account at Cubic, and really what that means is you can enable the capability for a customer to make multimodal and multi-use of the infrastructure through a single customer-facing interface. That's really all that means. We have a product that we sell, and in each of these, we're going to have a product that we sell because we know this is where transportation's headed. But at the same time, each of those systems has to be able to talk to each other. So even if you see a product of ours here, that does not mean that's the only one that's going to be in that ecosystem, and we acknowledge that. So we are building our next-gen products and services to have that level of interoperability that allows you to have a multitude of vendors that can still connect to each other within that framework. And it's going to have to meet a policy objective. So the issue is, a lot of this originated with the advent of Uber, so good on them. They did not create a new business. They addressed an existing business, but gave their users much more flexibility. And really all they did was take real-time information and make it so you could have more trust in the system to utilize that. And now you are seeing transit agencies and city governments start to respond to technology differently because they got their lesson the hard way the first time, and they're not going to do that again. So the mobility data specification that is guiding micromobility right now from a data standard perception, because there's multiple data standards, they can utilize that information because they learned we're going to have to control this up front. And that's where you all come in. There's a level of control that's very much required to address whatever the defined policy need is. And so we're going to layer technologies to meet a policy goal. This is the mass maturity model. And what that means is, if you're thinking about it from a CAV perspective, they've kind of given definitions of different levels so that you can start building towards a specific solution set. What this actually is individual technologies that are going to build on each other to meet a need. So let me show you what I mean. So you're taking Each of these, highway management, enforcement, fare collection, and you're building them on top of each other to be able to say, maybe in my area, congestion management is a stated policy goal. Maybe in my area, enhanced healthcare outcomes is my stated policy goal. You can layer technologies in a way that builds towards that particular goal that is unique to your reason for needing those technologies, and there should always be a reason. So what that actually looks like is individual services. Why does it keep doing that? There we go, there we go. Okay, so individual solutions that are building on each other. So we're starting at the lowest level with real-time information. And it's not shocking to probably many people in this room, but shocking to a lot of different rooms of how little real-time information is actually on buses. So I don't know for sure when my bus is gonna come and how late I'm gonna be to my meeting, which means I'm just gonna jump in an Uber. And that's a giant part of the problem. If it's not real, predictable, and on time, you're never going to be able to build towards the higher ends of this maturity scale. But if you start with that level, and then you're going up and you're saying, okay, I can now have single separate services, and I can book that, and I probably have 10 different apps downloaded on my phone. I mean, seriously, I have like 50 on my phone, because I'm in a lot of cities, but every city has a different set of those services. And so, but I still have access to more than I had 3 years ago. So I like that I have access to that information. But I apply some data analytics, and now I can utilize an open payments framework, and now we're talking. So I can book and pay for a multitude of these services. But as the region, if I haven't identified up front what policy I'm trying to address, then it's kind of a private sector free-for-all. So it's very important for the public sector to really start to own your power in defining what you want these outcomes to look like. So now I've gotten some analytics and I've put in some payment information. Now I can do road user charging and make it very specific. That all becomes part of a smart infrastructure framework. And as I said earlier, if we're only addressing cities, we're doing it wrong. That also goes for our infrastructure framework. So in a CAV society, people are assuming I'm going to be able to have eligible connectivity in this area. Well, if I have road user charging and I live outside of that area, but my car doesn't actually pick up because I don't have Wi-Fi at my house, because there's lots of rural areas that still don't have wireless connectivity, we're doing it wrong. So as an industry, we have to be actively advocating for solutions that meet every kind of user. One of Cubic's tenets in our legislative efforts this year was, we can't leave rural America behind. And so as we move to the conversation around 5G in cities, what are we doing for suburban and rural America to ensure that their connectivity is still there? And are we focusing on funding those areas so that we can do, fiber optic is probably pretty expensive and construction heavy for this kind of time where people don't have a lot of money to spend on these things. But is it a mesh network that goes onto an existing set of services? Like, there are solutions that exist, but we have to ensure that we're funding the solutions in those areas. So I am going to get us back on schedule and just run through a bunch of how to get there, giving some customer examples. So it starts with real-time information. So our customer SFMTA utilizes NextBus to enhance that real-time information that's coming to them. So that includes things like trip planning as part of their integrated network of services, and that gives more reliable information for multimodal access. And then you have LA. LA has and we're gonna walk you through it, very unique approach to this multimodal booking. So I can utilize my tap card to book and pay for multimodal services, and these are in addition to the additional ITS framework that they have. But my wallet, as it were, can pay for each of these different things because they have open APIs that are a part of this framework. So you make those connections through, ta-da, that mobile thing that people love. So these are, if you think back to that mass maturity model, the individual technologies that are layering towards each of these unique opportunities to enhance our quality of life. Miami's approach to that was to build out a cloud-based infrastructure to help future-proof their capability to ingest all of that data. It's like a crazy, stupid amount of data that we're now just coming up with every day as part of our everyday life. So your city services have to be able to ingest that information on an ongoing basis. And then as you move towards things like integrating the rest of your traffic management system, and that's obviously what TrafficWare and GridSmart do best. So super industry leading efforts on both the control side of the business as well as the infrastructure side of the business. How we're utilizing all of those things in tandem to address an overarching need. So in this case, that adaptive management across the bridge. And it's very similar to what's going on in Sydney on our ITMS project there. And what that's designed to do is to ingest information from different data points across the city, so city services and emergency management, to predict in 30 and act in 5. And really, we think this is just where the whole industry is headed, that you want to be able to predict what's going to happen so that I can reallocate my city services to be able to respond faster in the areas, or change my planning so that we're reallocating our infrastructure so that we are avoiding that what's happening, and then act in 5. And really we see this as a cost savings for regions, because if you can now respond sooner, you're lowering your overall operating cost while enhancing public healthcare outcomes. You can increase mortality rates. So really significantly affect your population by offering these kinds of services. And then, as we do continue to move on, the US is a little bit behind the rest of the world in how we can pay for this integrated solution, but also meeting people where they are. So Visa and MasterCard have announced that they're going to really speed up the allocation of open payment credit cards, because some people just want to pay with something that's already in their pocket. And that includes the Apple product that is now available in Chicago and with One Metro New York. And I will end with just a project that we're proud of, because it represents the first of these projects that is a true GridSmart TrafficWare combined opportunity. But we really see this not being a solution set that addresses only transit and a solution set that addresses only traffic, but solution sets that build on top of each other to really be able to transform how citizens interact in their community. And that means all of us. So I think we have a couple of minutes here for questions. Got it.
What's the difference between mobility as a service and mobility on demand?
Yeah, so I have lots of personal opinions on why the US has decided to use the word mobility on demand versus mobility as a service, and this is being recorded, so I'll say some at dinner. So as a subset, because actually I'm on both of those sides of the conversation, I'm on the ITS Mobility on Demand Committee, I'm their policy person, so I do both. So mobility on demand, in my opinion, is the subset of part of the framework that allows you to book and pay for a multimodal capability. To me, that limits what the industry can do, which is why mobility as a service, in my opinion, is just more robust. And it does integrate traffic management, freight management. it really helps address policy in ways that probably mobility on demand is more addressing transit. Or not just transit, but how people get places. Everybody's ready to go. Awesome. Go for it.
So there's many people that don't have a credit card. Some of them, you said, have a smartphone, and some of them don't have like a bank account or like a debit card. How do you address those?
So the
vulnerable-
unbanked and underbanked are definitely a huge part of making sure your policy addresses equity. So I actually know that Visa and MasterCard are having a lot of in-house demos on how to address that population as well. So I can't speak on behalf of them, but I can speak on behalf of a project that we did over the summer in Miami. It was a coordinated project that was trying to, Miami has, to get to the rail station, these north and south giant parking garages that are just tens and thousands of parking spaces, and they're totally full by like 7 a.m. So instead of building another parking garage, which we just know is induced demand, right? So that's not going to solve anything. They're trying to see what they can do to mitigate people coming. So we did a partnership with Uber and MasterCard in which we said, in this 5-mile radius around the rail station, can we buy your Uber to the rail station? And because they had just started open payments, which is really going to transform a lot of this, can I use my MasterCard that's linked to Uber to tap onto the rail? And because I made that tap, I got my Uber for free. And what is that going to do? So the outcomes were fascinating because it was a research project, also geek. We haven't written the paper on it yet, but we did present the findings at Railvolution a couple of weeks ago. Everyone, it was seriously like 86% of the people said if they had this capability in their wallet, that's what they would prefer to use, but they don't have an account or they don't qualify for credit. For this demo, they were prepaid cards, and that was actually part of Miami's goal. They said, if we're able to just purchase a prepaid card for our customer that gives them the MasterCard capability on the open loop side to go tap and be part of the network, but utilize our retail network to reload that card, it's just like cash, but it gives the same technical experience that everyone else has. And then they can take advantage of fare capping. So fare capping, if you're not familiar, is a fare management tool. So it has nothing to do with the technology. I get this all the time. People are like, oh, how come I can't do that? How come I can't use my card and just get the best fare regardless? That's a requirement of the agency. They have to implement a fare rule that says by a certain time of day, if you've spent this much money, that's all you're going to spend. And that's really the problem with the unbanked and underbanked, because from an equity standpoint, if I have to purchase cash every single time I use that trip and I can't pay for the month up front the way that people of means can do, then I am paying the highest fare all the time. And so we are putting the burden of the highest fares on those in our community that can least afford it. So I think as time goes on, it is going to be solved by a combination of the technology enhancing, but also looking at how we are funding our system differently. And instead of having closed loop cards that we purchase, perhaps we spend a little bit more money and do an open loop prepaid card. That was a super long explanation for a really small answer. So anybody else want a super long answer for something? No? Okay.
I have a quick question. This might be a hard one to answer because your strategy that you've explained, I'm sure, depends on many outliers and other agencies and whatnot. But what is the timeline, as you see it, for execution of some of these things on the list?
So that's why I think it's a maturity model. It's a framework that you build against. I say a full policy-driven congestion management program that can be used at a level 4 of mass maturity is going to take a level of coordination among agencies and public sector entities. So the funny thing about the answer for this is the public sector is constantly saying to the private sector, you need to integrate with all of these other private entities, and We want to be able to utilize whoever we want, so you need to integrate with them. Okay, that's great. So in the 25 agencies in the TAP program, we have to provide all of the back end and the fair rules and the settling that happens. It's very complex. And part of why I always say I have job security is because I have full confidence that government will continue to be complex. So we will always have a job. But in order to meet that need that they say, hey, private sector, we want you to coordinate, my response is, great. Can you get your Transit Management Association and your MPO and your city and your transit agency to come have a meeting with us, and we'll decide who those people are? Oh, no, Sally does not want to meet with me. We had a falling out a couple years ago. It is going to be very, very difficult to coordinate these services. So I'm not going to pretend like it's not. I will say it was going to start at the most innovative entities first, and LA is a good example of that in terms of coordination of those city services and how they're approaching it. So it's going to happen at a couple of cities that are more forward-thinking of what that coordinated effort needs to be. But I would say, in general, from a transportation perspective, these kinds of opportunities take 3 to 5 years to really fully flesh out. There are things that we can implement sooner, and so I think in the next year we're going to be seeing a lot more mobility on demand fully fleshed out, and maybe get to a place where we can even have some best practices in those areas, which still don't exist, because in my opinion, we did a demo, that's not a best practice, that's a demo. And maybe we'll wait and figure out what the good part of that demo was and not just go and say that it was a major success. Because even the study that we did in the Uber and MasterCard study that we did, there's about 10 things I did wrong. And so it'll be great for the next time we do the next study in this area. And so I'll add by saying, also, don't assume what those external entities' capabilities are and willingness to do those capabilities. Have a super open conversation, which is difficult for people who are very used to closed frameworks, closed proprietary systems. So it's even the industry needing to change how we talk with each other.
To have those types of conversations, they tend to be more difficult in North America than they are in Europe. Am I correct in that? Because I hear more about mobility as a service conferences or presentations traveling when we go to Europe than I hear even within Canada or maybe even within the United States. And so they tend to be easier conversations that based on government models I think they have in Europe versus the government system or that we have in America or even in Canada.
So I don't know that it's easier, and I don't know that they're more willing to have the conversation. They were sooner to having the conversation. So mass, for me, speaking on mass, has been 10 times more in the past 6 months than in the previous year. So more people in the US are starting to hear it and understand it and see how it affects our industries, because also traffic management, I've been to several of these industry events and nobody has a clue what mass is. It's the first time that they're looking at it. And so this is a real learning process for us. Mass originated in Finland, and it's now 5 years old. And so they've been having conferences for that period of time. They have an alliance that's built around it. Mobility on Demand Alliance at ITS America just started. It's about a year old. So we're just slower, but they are still having those same problems. And the public policy side of the conversation is not set in stone. And the only reason why Helsinki was able to do something as fast as it did, so the National Minister of Transportation changed the country code and required interoperability and a data standard. That would be so easy to do in the US, right? Change the law for transportation, just that one thing. So, oh my gosh, the trying to figure that out. And I don't think it's impossible. I just think Helsinki was able to do it in a year. And that kind of flip the switch is a really transformational leader in the right position at the right time. So Europe's having the same kinds of difficulties.
Alrighty, y'all, we need to break for our training classes that begin at 3, but Crissy will be up here. If you all want to speak with her, she'll be up here.